Ladies, my fellow mommies, we are always so busy, on the go, kids screaming in the back seat, sleeping babies. I have the ultimate hack for you.
Welcome to the Stay Fit Mom Podcast with Krista and Tracy, your go-to girls for health, fitness, and keeping it real in mom life.
If you can't seem to get in a good groove with your nutrition and exercise program, this is for you.
We've coached thousands of women using macros for over 8 years, and I'm well known around here for my 5-day meal prep videos.
What does a macro balanced meal look like?
Hit subscribe to the Stay Fit Mom Podcast and join us for a fun, meaningful journey toward a healthier, happier you.
You got this, Mom.
All right, we are here with episode 2, which is Macro Counting 101. And in this episode, we're going to talk about our history with macro counting as busy moms, what macro counting is and why you should count them, how it's different from calorie counting, keto, other diets, who's the ideal person for macro counting, how to set macros for fat loss, common trends that we've seen, why protein is so important, the concept of if it fits your macros, and then practical tips and tricks to macro counting with a busy schedule, along with stories mixed in all over. Krista, welcome back to episode 2.
I'm excited.
So let's go ahead and start with our history with macro counting as busy moms. Krista, tell us about when we started macro counting, how this came about.
So I dabbled in macro counting a little bit back after I had Archer. So that was 2013, just because I heard about it from a influencer I was following. So I had very little experience. But after we had our third babies, Ollie and McKenna, is when we decided to jump in, right? The local gym was doing a competition of some sort. And so you mentioned it to me and I said, yes, let's do it. I didn't actually do the challenge with the group, but I did it on my own and we both loved it.
Yeah, I think a lot of misconceptions that come with macro counting are that you have to be a bodybuilder or it's too complicated or you have to be obsessive about it for it to be effective. And you and I are just regular moms that have fitted into our lives for over 8 years, despite having full-time jobs, despite having tons of children and not being a bodybuilder or a fitness pro or anything spectacular in that realm. And so I always like to say, if we can do this, you can do this. There's no prerequisites to macro counting, but there are definitely people that are built for it, personality types, or there is like a prototype, I guess you could say, that it works really well for.
It definitely started out strong in the bodybuilding community. I want to say when I first looked into it, that's how I learned about everything was, I don't know, bodybuilding.com or something, because that's what bodybuilders did.
Right. So personally, I think that one thing that really helps push past this obsessive, compulsive mindset that some people fear that they can't count macros because then they're going to always have to weigh and measure their food, or their kids are going to see them meticulously measuring and that frightens them. It is intense in the beginning and people will say, I can't maintain this forever. So there's no point of me even trying. And to that, I like to say that macro counting is a tool and you use it as a tool. And at first, it should be intense because you're learning how to do it. But you and I have done this for so long that we go through phases of intensely tracking, loosey-goosey tracking, and then throwing all caution to the wind and not tracking at all. And then getting back to it when we feel like we need to tighten the reins. So if you think of it like that, macro counting is a tool that takes the pressure off of any sort of, I'm going to have to do this for the rest of my life. I'm going to have to weigh my strawberries until I'm 68 if I want this to be a long-term thing for me.
Right. As far as the kids go, I love macros and teaching my kids things about macros. You would be surprised to learn that kids don't learn basic nutrition 101 in school. They don't know what protein, carbs, and fats are. So it's kind of cool that when you dive into macros yourself, you can teach them these things. It's science. It's not like we're assigning this random number to foods. So that's something that they can learn at a young age, and then they'll be set for life. I didn't learn these things until we were older.
And so that brings up two things that I was thinking of. One is that you were a PE teacher, which would mean that this would fall into your realm of teaching. You know what kids are getting taught in school when it comes to nutrition and health and fitness, because that
Right.
was kind of what your specialty is in. It's not like you're just making a guess that kids aren't being taught this.
It wasn't in the curriculum.
So, yes, as mothers that learn this skill, we're passing it on to our children in a way that helps them to intuitively eat better. We'll go ahead and just talk about other diets because you mentioned assigning random points, which makes me
Mhm.
think of Weight Watchers. Weight Watchers
Yeah.
is probably a form of macro counting in some facet, but they're just applying random points to random foods, which isn't really applicable in any other facet of your life. If you were going to intuitively eat, but knowing the macros on foods is something that you do learn and you develop as you are tracking intensely, especially in the beginning. I know that if I have 27 carbs left at the end of the night, I know that that's about an apple. Or if
Right.
I have about 8 grams of fat and some protein and some random carbs, that's a tablespoon of peanut butter.
Mhm.
And those are skills that you develop as you macro track. You get to look at foods and see the macros that those foods consist of, which is going to help you with intuitive eating long term. People like to say that intuitive eating and macro counting are at odds, or it seems like in social media, it'll be like, don't macro count, intuitively eat, like they're two separate things. But talk about, Krista, you go ahead and share, how has macro counting helped you to intuitively eat better without tracking at all?
A lot of people, myself included, I always used to struggle with the idea of intuitively eating. What's been so great about macros is now I have a better understanding. I need to make sure I'm eating enough, not eating too little. But it's almost like I'm thinking about you mentioned like the bumpers in bowling.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like a boundary. It's a boundary that you can put up in your life that helps.
I think a lot of people need something like that. It's not that it has to be a super strict boundary. I mean, like you said, we're going on 8 years of macro counting off and on. It's something I know I can rely on.
Right. And I was thinking too how people will say, we're born with this ability to intuitively eat. Genetically, we have this capability to just intuitively eat. When in reality, the ways that our foods are made up now with
Mhm.
high fructose corn syrup and everything, sugar additives into everything to make you want to eat more. And so just eating less really is a hard concept. We're up against more when it comes to our food than we ever have in generations past. Fast food is a relatively new invention that is so convenient and so easy. And it's very difficult to just tell somebody, just eat less.
Intuitively, I want to eat all the delicious things. I'm not in the habit of going through the drive-through, but of course, some things just sound really good. So even when you're eating intuitively, you still in the back of your mind have to restrict yourself in a way. You can't just eat
Right.
everything that sounds delicious.
Or feels good to your body. The point being that they're not at odds. You can use macro counting as a tool to help you get to the point where you can estimate the macros that you're consuming to eat a relatively balanced meal without tracking and logging every single thing. So they're not at odds. They are very connected and they can be very empowering when it comes to intuitive eating if you have that background knowledge. How is macro counting different from calorie counting, Krista? Let's like go to the basics.
Well, I like to always say many people are familiar with calorie counting. You are counting calories, but essentially you're counting the macros that make up those calories. So instead of eating just 2,000 calories for the day, making sure you're eating that much, you're counting how many grams of protein, carbohydrates, and fat that make up those 2,000 calories.
The three macronutrients are, as Krista just said, protein, carbohydrates, and fats. For every gram of protein, it's 4 calories. For every gram of carbs, it's 4 calories. For every gram of fat, it's 9 calories. Chris is absolutely right. When you're counting your macros, you're focusing on more than just, I've just got to stay under the 2,000 calorie limit and I could eat 2,000 calories in pizza and still hit my goals. Whereas if you're macro counting, there's no way you're going to be able to eat 2,000 calories in pizza and hit your macros because your plate is going to have to be balanced in order for you to hit that protein goal without going way over on your carbs and fats. Which brings me to keto, whole 30, paleo. Those are some high fat diets. Maybe we can just talk a little bit about why that diet isn't the most ideal for a lot of people.
When we first started our website, we were big into paleo and whole 30. I remember we did whole 30 right after we both had Ollie and McKenna. I remember I made it 45 days and then I was just so very sick when I started eating regular food again. We didn't see drastic body composition changes. I remember being so frustrated. I only lost 9 or 10 pounds in 45 days of eating the cleanest foods possible. It's such a hard thing to do to find foods that are whole 30 compliant, that don't have any extra ingredients, and just looking in the mirror thinking, what was the point in all that? It was hard. You can eat low carb, but still exceed your daily calorie limit and not necessarily lose any weight because you're eating higher fat, which, like you mentioned, there's more calories per gram of fat versus carbohydrates and protein. So the calories really add up quickly when you are eating a lot of butters and oils and nuts and all the delicious high fat foods.
A lot of people say, rightly so, that in order to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. You have to be eating less calories than you burn. However, when you macro count, you can eat a lot more calories than you think you can because so many of those calories are coming from protein. And when you eat a substantial amount of protein, it brings your carbs and fats into balance. So the other thing that I wanted to bring up was this concept of within range. My mom, who's from Mexico, by the way, she's visiting in town with me right now, and we've got a million funny stories about her. But I remember her wanting me to set her up with macros. I want to do macros, Tracy. Give me macros. So I wrote her macros, and a couple weeks go by. And I ask her, how's it going? She's like, I am doing so good with macros. I'm crushing it every day. So I look at her food journals, and on all of them, she has not hit her macros once. I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? She's like, I am under my calories every day. I am under the goals. So, my fault as a macro coach. I didn't really dive into this with her, which is what we do with our one-on-one coaching clients, by the way, is we're taking them step by step through the process. And we say you have to hit your macros within range. So the goal is you want to be plus or minus 5 grams when it comes to protein. So if you're eating 145 grams or 155 grams, that's in that plus or minus 5 range. Same goes for carbs and fats. You want to be within 5 grams with fats because they're higher in calorie. You want to be within 2 grams. But my sweet old mom, she thought she was doing so well, but in reality, she was just not hitting those goals. But
Right. Well, I think that was the thing back when calorie counting. I remember calorie counting many years ago. You just needed to make sure to be under your calorie goal.
right.
It's not the case here. One of the reasons we have our clients hit all 3 macros within range, and we always suggest hitting your macros for at least 2 to 3 weeks, especially if you're doing it on your own, before you make any adjustments, because you're not going to know how to adjust your macros in 3 weeks if you have been under your goals, your daily goals for each macronutrient every single day. You don't know how those macros are working for you.
We like to say to our clients, you're a moving target. We can't nail down where we need to move you because you're all over. But once you nail those macros down and you say things like, I'm starving, there's no way I can keep this up, or I'm so full, this is too much, I can't sustain this that way. And when you hit within range, you're no longer a moving target and we can adjust accordingly. Let's talk about who is the ideal person for macro counting. Wouldn't you say that there's a personality type?
I just think about all of our clients who love to hit the green boxes, right? They all get a Google tracker. And when they're within range on those 3 macronutrients and they input what they hit for the day, if they're within range, the boxes light up green. And there's those personality types that like to see all the green on the spreadsheet.
I was asking Chris and I said, why do you like macro counting so much? Because I was just trying to get some ideas for this episode. And he said, well, because I'm type A. I'm type A. He's a box checker. So it's either you do it or you don't. There's no gray area. And obviously, we know there is a gray area with nutrition overall. But in general, macro counters that are type A just love to hit their macros. That's an organizational system. Like you were talking about, the boundaries that you can stay within.
I need those boundaries.
Right. And as you progress, your boundaries can get looser. We have clients go from tracking every single macro to I'm just going to track protein and I'm going to let carbs and fats lie where they fall.
And then, yes, along with you said something about you can track more loosely. And that goes with weighing all your foods as well. I think you mentioned weighing strawberries. You're not always going to need to put your bowl on the food scale and weigh out your strawberries. You're going to learn what a few ounces of strawberries looks like.
Right. And you learn that by initially weighing them, because if you're just thinking in your head, a tablespoon of peanut butter, and you weigh out a tablespoon, it's very different taking that heaping spoon versus when you're weighing it. So there is so much value to at least weighing it in the beginning. Another thing I was thinking about, eating a bag of chips. I could sit in front of the TV Super Bowl Sunday and not even think twice and eat that whole bag of chips until I started macro counting and I realized the concept of serving size. And now I would never just open up a bag of chips and go to town. I would measure out the serving size, put it in a little Ziploc baggie for me, and then enjoy those chips guilt free.
We actually had this discussion with our kids not too long ago. When you look at the back of a potato chip bag, for instance, that's the kind of things kids love. It's typically more than one serving in one of those Dorito bags from the convenience store. We had a conversation with them about it. Typically, you wouldn't want to eat the whole bag of Doritos. You would want to have one serving. And you can see on the back here that one serving is only a couple grams of protein or whatever.
So, real quick though, let's go back to this. A couple other people that should think about macro counting. Anybody with an urgency to take care of your health. Some people kind of want to dabble in macros, like, oh, maybe that might be for me. And I feel like there's a different level of urgency to people that are, I've hit rock bottom and I'm desperate and I will do whatever you tell me. That is almost one of my favorite clients because I know they're serious and they're just going to do what I say. And I know what works. We were adding up how many clients we've worked with over the last 8+ years, and it's over 8,500 clients. So we know what works for people. We've seen every client under the sun at this point, and that rock bottom, desperate, I just need you to tell me what to do client is a great place to be if you want to start tracking your macros. You're not too far gone. That's just another misconception. I'm just not fit enough for that. I'll start here. No, if you've got a will, there's a way. And I was also thinking about the budgeter. Chris and I are avid budgeters. And I always like to say, track your macros, change your life, because Chris and I started tracking our macros and we ended up applying that to our finances. And I think so many people are the other way around. They're completely fine with tracking their finances and being super vigilant with their budget. And then when we tell them, let's apply that intensity to your food, people are like, oh, that's obsessive or that's crazy. But people are fine with you doing that with your money. And it's the same concept. You've got a goal, you've got something that you want to save for, you've got some financial trajectories that you want to hit. You're going to want to know where every penny goes. And if you've got some goals, whether that be I want to walk across the bodybuilding stage or I want to play with my grandkids on the floor, macro counting can help you hit those goals.
Right. And your body and your health is just as important as your finances, if not more so.
We take our health for granted until things go wrong and then we hit that panic button. But absolutely. And then the last thing that I want to say is somebody on a GLP-1 receptor agonist is also a great candidate for macro counting because the mechanism of that drug is that it suppresses your natural hunger cues, and macro counting can help create those boundaries for you so you ensure that you're getting enough protein to sustain your muscle mass over time. Macro counting is about looking good naked. It's not really about your lowest amount on the scale. So pairing macro counting with a GLP-1 receptor agonist is a great recipe for success long term.
Right. And one of the things I think that we skipped over too was you will feel so much better. You will have so much more energy and be so much more productive if you balance your macros correctly.
So I kind of want to move into how we set macros for fat loss. And I don't want to go over all the formulas, although I'm going to link everything in the show notes so you will have that as a tool. But I did want to talk about just kind of the different ways that you can get macros set for you. Like I said, we're going to link a DIY, do your macros yourself using a generic formula. But Krista, do you want to maybe talk about how getting a custom macro count from us is different than that DIY? Why would I want a custom macro count from you if I could just get this generic formula?
I saw this discussion actually in our free macronutrition Facebook group. Someone was asking, why would I pay to have this done when I could just use a free online calculator? The thing is, the online calculator is simply using a generic formula. It's not taking into account your diet history. It's not taking into account your current relationship with food, your goals. We have a lot of moms who are pregnant or nursing. We send a very detailed questionnaire to anyone who purchases a custom macro count from us. We want to know everything, and we have a lot of experience working with over 8,500 women. We know a good place to put you to get started where you are going to be able to stick to it. We're going to give you something that is realistic for you, something that will be sustainable. And then, of course, we all give you tips and tricks, recipes, things that will help you be successful getting started on macros on your own.
The next thing that we offer is one-on-one coaching. And I kind of wanted to talk about the differences between just getting a generic formula, the custom count, and then the one-on-one coaching and how that It's like a tiered system. You get what you pay for kind of a thing where you're getting a lot more value for your money if you go the one-on-one coaching route, simply because you're not only getting one set of macros, but your coach is getting an even more thorough picture into your life and then adjusting your macros every single week based on your biofeedback, how your energy level is, your hunger, how you're sleeping at night, how sustainable is this for you, to adjusting and making sure that you're getting the results that you want to see. So those macros not only get set, but then they get adjusted week to week to week. And there's also nothing like the accountability of having somebody looking into your Google Tracker and seeing, are you doing what you said you're going to do? It just kicks up your results to a whole nother level.
And not to mention the community support, I think is a huge one. One of the main reasons Stay Fit Mom has grown is we have an amazing community of women. We have a private Ninja Insider Facebook group. We call them the Ninja Insiders. And this is full of all of our one-on-one clients and then paying Ninja Insider members. And those are typically past clients, one-on-one clients, or people who just want to be in the community for extra support.
So let's talk about the coaches really quick, because that's another piece of the one-on-one coaching. We have the best coaches. And people will email in all the time. Will you work with me if I've had ... every experience under the sun? If I've had cancer, if I have PCOS, if I have type 1 diabetes. And the answer to all of those questions is yes, because we work one-on-one. We're not group coaching. You get your own personal coach, and our coaches are second to none, fantastic. When we're training our coaches, which is what we do, by the way, is we train our own coaches. They're women that have been part of our community, but also just have a commitment to helping other women, along with so many other credentials. Our coaching staff is just dynamite. When we're training, we say our goal is for you to get a Christmas card from your client. That's the kind of relationship we want to see you have with your clients. That's the target that they're shooting for. They're not just some robot that you're talking to every single week. They're real women that know your struggles. This is a message from one of the clients to a coach today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your support and encouragement. I always look forward to your messages, and they're so positive and encouraging. I appreciate your understanding of my life as a teacher and the role I have as an adopted and foster mom. It's so nice to be seen by another woman who understands all the demands and pressures that come along with education and the challenges we face with our children. You keep me grounded and focused on how my parents might feel. It's just so personal that these coaches are pouring into each client. We just can't say enough wonderful things about the coaches that we have on staff, some of which have been with us for so long, some of which are gluten-free, have Hashimoto's. We have one coach on the staff that's not a mom at all. That is not a requirement to working with Stay Fit Mom. We just have a diverse, incredible, hardworking coaching staff. Let's talk about some of the trends that we've seen from people that we've worked with one-on-one. So if you come to us and we're getting your food journals for the first time, trends that we typically see from women are the typical American diet. This is what I think of as cereal for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, pasta for dinner, which of course we know is very high in carbs and fats. And then we also have this other client that's the typical American dieter. And that would be somebody that has a very high fat, low carb diet. That's what we were talking about earlier. They might eat low calories. Typically speaking, 50% of the clients we set macros for are under eating in calories when they submit their food journals to us. 85 to 90% of the clients we set macros for are under eating pretty significantly in the area of protein. If you want your metabolism to be working at an optimal level, if you want your hormones to be balanced, if you want increases in your energy and your sleep, you have to prioritize muscle preservation. We were talking earlier how being in a calorie deficit could still leave you very unhealthy or not reaching the body composition goals that you have in mind. So think about it this way. Your body is fighting to preserve this stable internal environment. When your body doesn't get enough energy from food, it breaks down muscle tissue for fuel because muscle is far easier to break down than fat. And so eating a protein-rich diet can help reduce muscle loss during a calorie deficit. Let's now go on to talk about how macro counting allows flexibility in your diet. Of course, we're going to talk about recipes next episode specifically, but I remember we first started doing macro counting content and you were jumping for joy because you could write recipes with all the macros in them.
That's right. I remember feeling so restrained. I can't come up with more recipes. I can only do so much with meat and vegetables. That got really boring really quick. So, if it fits your macros, that's a popular term used in the macro counting world because you can fit foods that you love into your macro budget and still balance the rest of your food for the day. It just brings you so much freedom. And you can't fill your macros with multiple indulgences like pizza and ice cream and all those things in one day. Of course not. You can pick one or two things, fit it into your macros for the day when you want to, and still eat balanced and still feel great. I think about like in the past doing paleo or whole 30. It was like, we have a date night. I'm going to eat whatever I want and get off track. And then I feel like garbage the next day because of it.
I had a friend that was trying macros for the first time, and she came from this paleo whole 30 background, and she was panicked because she went to a potluck and she was like, Tracy, on paleo and whole 30, I knew what I could eat at the potluck. And now what do I do? Which could be an episode in itself. But I was going to say the trade off with tracking macros is, yeah, you get to eat all the food groups. However, you have to plan for it in advance. And so that's where it gets a little bit tricky. There's different tips and tricks that you can do that will enable you to indulge more if you're going out. But
Right.
for sure, you have to plan ahead.
And it's not necessarily an everyday thing. It's not like you need to plan in these special go out to eat or whatever every single day, but on occasion when you want to, or if you want just a small special treat at the end of the night, you easily can.
And I like what you were saying about how it's not like you want pizza and ice cream and all these indulgences in one day. You don't. You just want to be able to have something sometime. And there's that kind of hope with macro counting that you can factor that into your day almost every day if you want to and still hit your macros. So that's great. Obviously, there's a trade-off, but you can plan ahead and have your favorite things. So, last topic that we're going to cover is just some practical tips and tricks that will help you to macro count when you have a busy schedule, which let's just start there. We are busy. We're so busy all the time. I feel like our sole goal has been how do we make this easy for moms that are busy so it's not all consuming? What do you think?
The first thing that always comes to mind is planning ahead and meal prepping.
Yep.
If you don't have a plan, you're not going to ever hit your macros. You need to have something in mind what you're going to eat each day to be within range of hitting those macros.
Yep, that's exactly right. I have that in there. Plan your macros out the night before. I always tell this to our clients that you think that macro counting is going to be all consuming and not sustainable because the first time that you try to plan out your macros the night before, it is going to take you an outrageous amount of time. At least it did for me. And I remember calling Krista that first day that we were going to do macro counting. And I said, Krista, it took me 90 minutes to get my macros within range. There's no way that I can do this the rest of my life. I don't have an extra hour and a half. And Krista just laughed like, what are you doing over there? But I had no sort of skill set. I didn't know which foods were which macros. I didn't know these MyFitnessPal tips and tricks that allows you to save a meal and copy it to the next day. I didn't know those macro hacks that make this process so much easier. And so now what used to take me 90 minutes to get my macros within range now takes me about 90 seconds. And you get to the point where I haven't planned out my macros the night before in years because I'm so confident that I can hit my macros that there's no need for that. So don't let the idea of this is going to be really hard and intense up front scare you away because it's not always going to be really hard and intense. One piece of advice I have for macros is I want you to think about it like you're building this snowball. It just takes forever to get it going. And it takes forever to figure this process out and get it going. And you feel like, am I even doing anything? The results in the beginning are not substantial. I remember tracking and I was postpartum, had 50 pounds of baby weight to lose, and I had been tracking my macros for 2 weeks. And I was so frustrated that I got on the scale and lost a half a pound or something that seemed so insignificant for all the work, all the effort that I put in. It didn't seem like the trade-off was worth it. However, I took the progress pictures. Thank the Lord I took the progress pictures because I had lost an entire back fat roll. But I would have never known that if I would have just based all of my results on the scale and how time consuming this took me in the beginning. I would have never stuck with it. So that's another reason why having a coach, somebody there for you that is talking you off the ledge and telling you every single effort that you put in is adding up to something just like that snowball. You go ahead and talk about those meal prep bowls, Krista, how they make tracking so easy. When people have a problem hitting their macros, I just want to say, have you made any of the meal prep bowls? Because they're 50 grams of protein per bowl. I go over sometimes. I have to cut off my protein when I have those.
When you were talking about when we first got started tracking macros, I was thinking about how we didn't have all the things that we have now that we have to offer all of our clients and that we get to use ourselves. Just simple things like within the app or even all these recipes. In the very beginning, I remember thinking we need more recipes for our clients. That is the hardest thing for people to come up with meals and to have it all macro calculated. Hitting their macros would be so much easier if they just had stuff that was already done for them. That's how I got really into creating all these recipes, the bowls, specifically meal prep bowls. It just makes it so much easier. And those ideally and originally were thought of as something to make for lunch, especially because a lot of us are moms and have families. You can easily make a meal prep bowl for lunch, put it into your budget for the day, and then budget in something to make for your family and eat as a family, fill in the gaps, breakfast, whatever. But having all these recipes at your fingertips and these meal prep recipes just makes it so much easier.
It will change your macro counting life because you no longer have to think of how am I going to reach these goals. Do you remember the one night where we were both like double fisting
Right.
ham and Greek
Yes,
yogurt?
yes. I remember sitting on the couch next to Chad. We're watching TV and I sit down and I've got like a protein shake and Greek yogurt in a bowl and rolled up Costco ham. That stuff has great macros. And I was just like stuffed eating it. And Chad was just like, what are you doing? The next day, the scale was down and I just couldn't believe it. I was so excited. You talked about your journey with macros and how
Yep.
long it takes. I think a lot of people give up. They do give up quickly because they are used to seeing these immediate results when they do these crash diets. So when macros takes a little bit longer, like in Tracy's case, people tend to give up because they're just not seeing long term. I want to say it took me 15 months, maybe 18 months to lose the baby weight tracking macros. That's a significant amount of time. But luckily, I had you and the other coaches to lean on. I remember multiple times saying in our coaches chat, you guys, this is just taking forever. This isn't working. I went and had a body scan, and the changes over 6 weeks were just not drastic at all. And you guys were like, just put your head down, keep working. And I needed that. I needed that support, and I did. And yeah, 15 months later, I just felt like myself again.
I'll have to remember to link these in the show notes because the progress pictures are jaw dropping. And also, it is sustainable. This isn't, I lost the 20 pounds and then I just gained them right back. This is something that if you do it the long way, if you do it the right way, these are lasting changes. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be at your lowest weight forever. You might bounce up a little bit, but in terms of your longevity and your muscle mass and your fitness level, those are going to maintain, which is exciting. So I did ask our ninjas what silly things they've done to hit their macros at the other night. And these are a couple of their stories. Eating 1.5 cups of cooked egg whites plain to hit my goals before heading to the airport for a late flight for a girls' weekend trip. I did get them crispy flat like an unfilled omelet so I could pick it up and eat it like a sandwich.
Oh, I could never. What are the other ones?
This one was standing at the pantry at 10 p.m., counting out Trader Joe's Scandinavian swimmers to finish out my carbs for the day. The
Oh, that sounds
sweetest
amazing.
fish. Yeah.
Oh, I thought
I'm-
these were all going to be gross ones.
Then I asked people, what were the most ridiculous diets you've done? And then people would say, back in the day, eating 500 calories or less. The idea of that now to them was so outrageous because they eat way more. What are your macros right now? I was just thinking about, we should probably share what our own macros are.
Well, let me just look. I was also thinking about my older sister. She counted her macros for a while.
Mhm.
I do distinctly remember her telling us one night that she was under her fat grams. So she took a tablespoon of mayonnaise and she ate it one night. And that might be
Of
the
all
worst. What would you eat if you needed just fat?
Pecans.
All
Aren't pecans? They're so high in fat and they taste a little bit better. I don't know. Ranch, even ranch dressing at least would be better than mayo.
You're also
I don't
going to
know.
get some carbohydrates and some protein.
true.
Olives are a good one if you have olives.
Yes.
Always go that
Yes.
route.
I'll share mine while you're looking for yours. So my macros right now, I eat 2,145 calories a day, and my macros are 145 protein. And just some stats, I'm 5'6", I weigh 150 pounds. I feel like that's just where my body's happy. I wouldn't mind being pounds less, but I also feel like I know the kind of sacrifice that it takes to be 10 pounds less, and I don't know that I'm willing to go there. So anyway, that's a whole conversation for something else. But I am 150, 5'6". My macros are 2145 calories, 145 protein, 211 carbs, and 80 grams of fat. And I feel like that puts me in enough of a calorie deficit to still see results, but not make me too grouchy for the rest of my family to deal with.
Okay, well, I'll share mine. I am in a calorie deficit. My current calories are just under 1,800. My protein is at 150. My carbohydrates are at 155 and my fat is at 64. Now, this is definitely the lower end of a deficit for me. I am currently 161 pounds, which is on the lower end for me. It's been going well, the cut. I'm feeling great. Performance has definitely suffered, but I'm feeling good. My macros are in a good spot.
And how tall are you, Krista?
5'6".
So I just want to share that because I feel like we're similar. We're not that far off on weight. We're same height, but our macros are pretty different, you know? And so I just wanted to share that for anybody that's like, oh, same weight, same height. Their macros are probably the same. And I remember people telling me that at the beginning, can I just do what your macros are? You've got some macros. Can I just do those? One of our coaches on staff, Chelsea, who I've coached for years, and her maintenance calories are like 3,000 calories. This woman eats so much food, and I bring her down to 2,700 and she's in a calorie deficit. And then we've worked with other women that are 200 plus pounds and they're at 1,500 calories and they're struggling. So it really does depend so much upon your genetics and your diet history, all of those things that Krista was mentioning earlier. Your macros can be drastically different. Just because your stats are similar doesn't necessarily mean that your macros are going to be similar.
Right.
I went through our coaches' advice because me and you are not coaching hundreds of women like we were at one point. So I was asking our coaches, you tell me, what's your best piece of advice? And they said things like throw away the scale, consistency trumps intensity, plan your food the night before.
Right.
Don't compare your journey to anyone else's. And then the other one that I loved was tomorrow's a new day.
We hope this was helpful and encouraging. And if macros is something you have thought about doing or dabbled in a little bit, hopefully we shared some tips and tricks that will help you tackle macros.
We have so many resources at your fingertips that will make this process easier. Head to our website for free recipes and macro resources. We'll catch you next time.
We appreciate you tuning in to the Stay Fit Mom podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Connect with us on social media and head to stayfitmom.com for more resources and tips. You've got this. See you next time.